Welcome to Williams Mullen's COVID-19 comeback plan. My name is Rob Van Arnam, partner and chair of the firm's intellectual property practice. With me today is my colleague, Jen McLemore, a partner in our bankruptcy and creditor rights practice. COVID-19 has taken a significant toll on a variety of businesses, and despite their best efforts, some may end up in bankruptcy. For those businesses, selling IP assets may enable them to find liquidity, satisfy creditors, or find new liquidity to emerge from bankruptcy. Other businesses may be able to position themselves for longer term success by identifying and strategically acquiring those potentially valuable IP assets. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Trends we've seen in bankruptcy filings, particularly with brands or IP assets, and how you can identify potential opportunities. So with that, Jen, let me turn it over to you. What trends have you seen, particularly with bankruptcy filings with IP assets?
Well, thanks, Rob. 2020 has been an interesting year. There's been a lot of retail. And so we'll use that as an example today to talk about the different kinds of strategic IP opportunities we see out there. What we've been seeing in the retail cases is they will have, because bankruptcy lawyers are not necessarily as sophisticated as the average IP lawyer, we have what are called IP sales, where they're really selling a .com aspect of a business. So we've seen a .com sale of the whole going concern. So think, for example, of an entire company is getting rid of perhaps their stores, their physical bricks and mortar, and they're going to sell the valuable remainder of the business, which they view to be the .com. And someone comes in and they have an auction. And during the auction process, you can buy the whole lock, stock, and barrel, all the infrastructure, all the licenses to use the name, and the .com online presence. The other thing we see is where a company analyzes its whole portfolio of .com assets, and then they'll sell a couple of business lines. So say, for an example, a clothing company has multiple different entities, and they all have different .coms associated with them, and maybe some of them have bricks and mortar and some are online. The bankrupt entity decides to get rid of a couple of strategic lines of business, and so those may be up for grabs in an auction process. And then another interesting opportunity I have seen in the past is where a competitor or a strategic party comes in to buy a specific line of .coms to maybe keep those .coms quiet or dark, so that they are taking a competitive party out of the space just by taking up someone's name. And of course, IP and trademark licenses can be far broader than .com. So these are really just examples. And then of course, in all of these .com sales are infrastructure and all sorts of different intellectual property components for the delivery lines or other lines of business that may be associated with these whole lines of business that are getting sold. So it's not just the .com, and bankruptcy lawyers may not be being terribly sophisticated or specific when they call it an IP auction, but that's the kind of thing we've been seeing this year. And I do think it provides an example of a place where there may be an opportunity. The other part about these sales that are very typical in bankruptcy and may explain the lack of detail by bankruptcy attorneys is these sales come on fast. They can come on, the motion gets filed on a Monday, the hearing to approve the proposed process happens on a Wednesday, and the auction's the next Monday. It can be that quick, so that if you're not paying attention or you're not aware of the issue, it can be over and done before you even knew that it was an opportunity. In addition, bankruptcy cases are very document specific, very document heavy. So having one of these opportunities come up very quickly can turn into a nightmare scenario if you're not prepared for it coming along. And the other fun thing about bankruptcy is that while there are rules and a whole book of them, bankruptcy is the nuance between the rules and the interplay of the rules. And so it can be a really great opportunity to find these assets, but you need to have professional assistance to navigate the process and make sure that it's all documented properly. And the bankruptcy issues, Rob, as you know well, the bankruptcy issues for selling IP aren't the only complexities, because there are complexities when you're talking about buying IP assets, even in a non-bankruptcy context.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And you mentioned retail and some of the .com There are distressed companies and assets and other forms of industry and IP, whether it's AI and machine learning, life sciences. A lot of development and patent portfolios have been built up, but with smaller companies who may not make it. And there are a lot of opportunities. Companies can look to those assets to build out their own portfolios, to extend a line of business that they were thinking about, or as a defensive measure to build up their portfolios as a way to defend against, for instance, patent suits by competitors or even non-practicing entities. So there's a lot of technology in life sciences and IP assets that may be out there for companies or private equity folks to identify. As you mentioned, the speed of bankruptcy happens quickly. So due diligence is important. And typically these sales are compressed and due diligence is compressed. And the seller may not be a going concern, may not have the ability to help or to answer questions. So it's really important to be proactive, maybe pre-petition, and to be trying to identify these assets and these opportunities. And of course, the portfolios that you're looking at may not be in great shape. If they've been distressed for a while, maintenance fees may not have been paid, annuities may not have been paid. They may be running the risk of losing their rights in foreign countries, for instance, trademark or patent. And that's all things that need to be carefully looked at. And with that in mind, though, Jen, what's the best way to identify these opportunities and to be thinking about ways to approach bankruptcy and identifying assets?
So you can certainly, if there are industry watch lists out there for what industries may be in trouble, and they get very specific for which companies may not be properly capitalized, which companies have asked for extensions or forbearance agreements. There is a lot of information out there that can be ascertained, and we can assist in providing that information. Trade publications and other rags out there that are out there that companies are normally looking at should have some of that distressed information. So if you get an idea that a potential target where someone already has the full portfolio of interconnected IP already put together, in an area where you want to expand your business, or an area where it would be a strategic move, contacting an attorney to take a look at those things and get a watch list put together is a helpful way to be on the cutting edge, so that if a company does fall in quickly into bankruptcy, you're right there and ready, and you're not trying to catch up. Because I can only imagine, someone wanting to come in and buy even a strategic, something as simple as a .com line of business, which is really just a sales venue. Getting up to speed, putting together your transaction documents really does create a fire drill, and I'm very much opposed to fire drills. They happen, but if we can control it and we can be on top of the issues, you're going to have a better transaction. Rob, as you pointed out, you can have a better idea of how up to speed and up to date the IP portfolio maintenance has been, how that's been maintained, so that you're not buying a mystery, but you know exactly what you're buying and you're paying the right amount for it. Because even when it's an auction, that auction mentality, you don't want to overpay, and you don't want to buy something that's not worth what you think it's worth, and you only find out later because the due diligence process was too quick. So that's certainly an important aspect.
Yeah, that's right. And of course, we've been talking about, potential buyers and looking at IP assets. Bankruptcy isn't the end of the line for companies in the way that they can reorganize, they can monetize and use their IP in different ways. We've seen a lot of companies be able to do that if they think about it carefully, proactively. They can, like for instance, some examples in the past have been a large retailer. We've seen a large telecom sell certain assets, but also expand their IP patent rights to be able to monetize that and keep through reorganization. So there's opportunities for those distressed and companies in bankruptcy as well. Any final words on that about issues that people should be thinking about as they're in or approaching bankruptcy?
I think my final thought would be this is an opportunity that's out there. If, as a company, you've analyzed where you may want to make a strategic expansion or where there's a competitive advantage to be gained, start paying attention to the news cycle. See what's going on out there, and if there is an opportunity, don't wait for the auction notice, the motion to get it approved to be filed. Stay as on top of that as you possibly can, because the advantage may be out there, but it may slip through your fingers if you're not on top of it as it's happening.
Right. Good advice. Well, that's our time for today. Thanks for joining us. For any questions, please contact Jen or me. Our contact information will be included with this presentation. Also, be sure to visit williamsmullen.com for more ideas and best practices. And in the coming weeks, we'll continue to put out a variety of resources to help you and your business during and after COVID. Thank you.
Thanks.